I was connected with Dmitrij about 3 weeks ago now. So Dmitrij and Christopher are the co-founders of Evolute Institute. So it's a Netherlands-based organization, and essentially they are working in the exciting sphere of psychedelic-assisted therapy. And we're going to see a short presentation by Christopher and Dmitrij now, well, in a few minutes, highlighting and showing you all exactly, what happens during the program. So the reason that I was so keen to chat with Dmitrij is because psychedelic therapy, it's no longer in the shadows. It's really very much at the forefront, in terms of the most entrepreneurs I know have either experienced it or are very curious to experience it. So it's very much in vogue at the moment. However, what stood out to me about Dmitrij and Christopher's Evolute Institute is the fact that they approach the whole experience almost like a formal curriculum. So it's not just the one-day experience that takes place in the Netherlands. There's a lead up to the experience. There's a follow-up, number of sessions over the course of many weeks. So hands up, myself, I've always lent towards taking myself off to the, Czech mountain ranges and disappearing into nature for a good few hours. Whereas I'm really excited to experience the Evolute Institute's program in May is the next time that I'll be visiting. And to be clear, I haven't been along to their program yet, so tremendously excited. And on that note, I'll hand the floor over to Christopher and Dmitrij to tell us more.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mike, for the kind introduction. So Christopher and I will have a few slides for you where we show you a bit how we frame this psychedelic-assisted inner work, and what we mean by it, and especially how it is relevant for people in entrepreneurial or leadership positions. So probably relevant for you. A few words about myself. I have a background in business, then went on to a career in academia, health services research, had a 5-year stay at a US machine learning company. And around that time, probably 5 years ago, had my first psychedelic experience, which set me off a very different path in life. And here you have a little picture on the left-hand side, that little hut where I had my first psychedelic encounter, which more or less I stumbled into. I didn't plan it. I didn't have any experiences with drugs, as you might call them, beyond alcohol or so. So I was very critical that it would even work for me. I didn't have any background, so I was rather naive, and at the same time brought some arrogance with me, thinking, well, this is only some esoteric woo-woo. It's not going to affect me. And as you can imagine, that night, a rug was pulled out of under my feet, and it was a wake-up moment for me in my life, where I realized, on the one hand, how much unintegrated stuff I was still carrying within me, how many wounds from the past, and also emotional baggage I was still carrying that was still influencing me throughout my day-to-day life. And on the other hand, I think it was the first experience in my life where I was made aware that there is something beyond the rational. So it's not about leaving rationality behind and thinking it's all stupid, but that there is something that transcends it. And that for me literally was mind cracking. So that set me off a different trajectory in life, where I started exploring the different concepts of inner work, from meditation up to psychedelic work. And eventually met Christopher along the way. And we thought, how can we make this work, the psychedelic work, available to more people, especially to people who not necessarily get in touch with that topic frequently. And so a few years later, here we are. And so we are excited to talk to you about it. And Christopher, I hand you over the virtual ball.
Yes, Thank you. So yeah, I'm Christopher. I'm half German, half Greek, but I was born and grew up in Germany. My original sin was to study business, and that set me on a path of working in communication in organizations for some time, in marketing, PR, and other forms of communication. And I then moved into speaker coaching at some point, and coaching for the large German TEDx conferences. I don't know if you've heard about TED Talks, TED conferences, so TEDx Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Munich, and TED events like TEDx Allianz or corporate TED events and so on. I also have a training in business and personal coaching. And over time, I progressively developed and deepened, in a way, my coaching practice. So I was less and less interested in just helping people to talk like TED and to get better in storytelling and in delivery. I still do this today. It's more like a hobby, but the deeper work and also deep coaching got more and more interesting. And also I was moving more from communication to leadership topics. And so over the past 10 years, I've been involved in this in a self-employed role with my own company. And I, as part of my own personal path of inner development, I got to know different modalities. And it started out with more like, let's say, generally known modalities like a meditation retreat or so, or the Hoffman process, which is a week-long, very intense retreat where you deal with your patterns, your attachment patterns with your father and mother and so on. So it started out with this, and then it went into body work, somatic work. I have some trainings in integrative somatic process, for example. And then I also stumbled into my own, well, not really stumbled like Dmitrij. I went to a psychedelic retreat. And in my case, it was like, you see that was the image from before, I showed again. So this is like, on the right-hand side, it looks a bit more, well, how do you say? Established. The hut is like a proper house in the Netherlands near Apeldoorn, where I attended a 3-day retreat. And unlike in the Brazilian jungle where it's ayahuasca, my experience was with psilocybin-containing truffles. So commonly called magic mushrooms. But actually it's not the fruit body, it's the part under the ground. And yeah, that was also a very profound experience for me. I think like sometimes we say psychedelics are a technology of connection or of reconnection. And for this experience, even though I didn't know much about it before, was exactly that on different levels. So for me, for example, it connected me at a whole new level with my body. I didn't even know how disembodied I was. Like I was very like much living in my head, and maybe not as rational as Dimi, but like still like more top heavy, not even knowing how much you could feel and be in your body. So this opened this channel and really deepened also my interest in the somatic work and the body work. And the second layer was, in a way, the ancestral layer. I had, because I was born and grew up in Germany, and because of difficult family situations, and also, I think what I know now, intergenerational trauma, this was really cut off in a way. And this was open for me in my, this channel, let's say, was open for me in the experience. And it made me like long for the land of my ancestors. I really literally saw like the Greek earth and my desire to really connect with this heritage and this ancestry. So there was a second layer, and the third layer was maybe the most unexpected. I saw like in front of my inner eye the whole evolutionary chain, like from the primordial soup through the fish and the amphibians and the mammals and then the great apes, and then we, like us humans today, standing on top of this humongous mountain of biomass, basically everything that has lived and struggled and died before us. And it filled me with a great sense of gratitude, but also responsibility. And so in a way, for me, that was at the time in 2018, like almost like a call to leadership. So it's now to us to really make something out of it and do something with it. And so those 3 levels were all like levels of connection, right? To my body, to myself, to nature, to the evolution, to life in the biosphere, and to my ancestry. And yeah, when I came out of this, I was like, how would the world look like if more people had this experience? And especially more people in positions of power and responsibility. So like leaders, people I work with in organizations on a day-to-day basis, but in more boring standard training settings or one-on-one coaching settings. And so fast forward 6 years, here we are. We have built Evolute Institute. I met Dimi along the way. At the time, 2018, we didn't know each other, and we have become co-founders and partners, business partners for this enterprise. And yeah, today we want to talk a bit about as Dimi and also Mike said, like about the potential of psychedelics actually for personal and maybe even leadership development. Yeah. Okay, so dive in again. And I don't know if you're here, maybe you're here because, of course, you saw the invitation and you might even know Mike and so on. But it might also be because you got curious, because in the media, there have been lots of reports about psychedelics in the past years, right? So there has been reports of the psychedelic renaissance, and which was first a scientific research renaissance. And there have been spectacular results of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy in different domains, especially with treatment-resistant depression. And there you would use psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in the mushrooms, or with MDMA for treating PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And from the scientific world, it spilled into the mainstream world and even into the business world. So I had to laugh a lot when I saw this title of The Economist, and it says like, the ultimate business trip. Bosses want to feed psychedelics to their staff. Are they high? So you see, it was taken up there. It was taken up in Bloomberg, like, forget Burning Man, psychedelic shamans are now heading to Davos. And also for founders. So psychedelics are exploding in the startup community. As founders say, it makes them better leaders. And this is also our experience that often entrepreneurial minds, as we call them, founders, entrepreneurs are very much attracted to this and more open to this maybe than traditional, like big corporation managers or so on, right? And yeah, so, and also in the German media, so for those of you who read German, so when the boss takes psychedelic drugs, that's the first line in Der Spiegel. And then, well, the title is, of course, anyhow English, High Performer, which is a pun, of course. And this was actually written about one of our retreats, our work. And so to start out, I want to ask you, so what does the word psychedelic mean, actually? And if you like, you can write it in the chat, your answer. So we have different options here, like you can become a millionaire here in substance that induces psychosis, A. Or B, it means mind manifesting. Or C, the substance of hallucination. Or is it D, the divine within? And we even have a fifth option for you. So we're cheating with who gets to be a millionaire. Or does it mean that which turns you into a psychic? So please write into the chat, is it A, B, C, D, or E? What does psychedelic mean? So we have B, B, and C. B, okay. C, yes. S. All of them. Yes, in a way. So we didn't make it too easy here, but yes. I mean, literally, what psychedelics mean is of course Greek, you know, my Greek heritage. So everything comes from Greek. Tell me any word and I prove to you that it is of Greek origin. So it comes from psyche, which is something like the mind, right? But interestingly enough, like the Greeks thought of the psyche not just located in your head. The idea was much more that it's your whole in your whole body. So it's maybe much closer to our concept of the soul today. Psyche, and then delic comes from Delos. You know the corporation in Westworld that produces the AI? No, actually, it the other way around. So the Greeks invented it. It means to reveal or to manifest. So psychedelics are mind manifesting, or dare I say, soul manifesting substances. That's the literal definition. And then, of course, the other options we gave you are either accidents that can happen, like if you would say psychosis, or there are other names that have been given. So, for example, generating the divine within, or realizing the divine within. That would mean entheogen, and that's also a name that psychedelics have been called by other people. Okay, and with this, I think I hand over to Dimi. You have been hearing me talking for a long time now. So Dimi.
Yeah. So I mean, so the thing is that most of us, we have heard that some people have taken psychedelics mostly for recreational purposes. And I hope you see my screen now.
Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Okay. So let me just see it as well. Yeah, here we go. And so at the same time, probably the least of them have said that has been really a truly life-shaking, positively speaking, event, or that it has really touched them down to the core. And that is because psychedelics unfold their effect very much as a function of where you take them and what kind of container, what kind of emotional and physical setting, with what kind of intention. And the results of these psychedelic experiences can vary tremendously. So on the one hand, in the worst case scenario, this is what we experienced in the 50s when the CIA experimented with psychedelics such as LSD to derive a truth serum, and that had very detrimental effects on people's health. And on the other extreme, what we're seeing now more and more is that psychedelics are being used as clinical treatments, as Chris mentioned, for PTSD and depression, as you can see here, in the form of a ketamine IV. However, none of this really explains or approximates what we're doing at Evolute. What we are doing is not therapy. It is really intentional ceremonial work where we give people a safe space where they can explore their individual intention, and that might range from how can I get to know myself better, up to I have certain topics that I know are holding me back, topics from the past that I now want to address, so that I can gain, for instance, more clarity in my life. And so this is what we try to do with the Evolute Institute. And at the same time, the question is, well, okay, sounds good, but how does that really relate to personal development? And especially also, how does that help us nurture capacities that are relevant for leadership? I think one of the most exciting elements about the psychedelic work is that it really allows you to take on a radically different perspective. And maybe the best way to speak about it is to think of the self model that you have. So usually when you walk through life, you see the world through your eyes, right? And so while you do sense with them, you cannot see your eyes from the outside, right? And this is kind of your self model, what you think about yourself, what you're good at, what you're bad at, if you're worth something or not. And psychedelics really allow you to take a look from the outside. So you actually see the structures that you are creating, which is a very powerful way of approaching your blind spots, but also seeing yourself afresh and then choosing and having actually the option to grow and to develop, and maybe even to choose to construct that structure in a different way. And so the classical way when we talk about growth or development is we think, oh yeah, I have to learn something. So imagine you have a certain capacity to hold complexity, to navigate in the world, and we feed in information into that bucket. But at some point, especially in turbulent times, what happens is if more and more input gets thrown into that bowl, it starts overflowing. And what we need is not really more information, but we really need a way to perceive development as a vertical movement. That means to expand the container that we have so that we can actually bear more of the world in us and then choose to respond to it and not to react out of a programmed or habituated way, but actually have the inner space, the inner freedom to choose consciously and with awareness our response. And this is where we think that psychedelics can be a very powerful consciousness technology, so to speak, to provide us a new perspective on ourselves and then expand our container. And more broadly speaking, and this is adapted from those pioneers of integral theory like Ken Wilber, psychedelics allow us to develop in a holistic way. So the one thing that they really do in a very radical way is help us to wake up, or that means to obtain a new vantage point from which we view life. So they allow us to transcend old concepts of self that we take for granted, that we do not see, and realize, oh yeah, this is how I have been, or this is really what is currently happening in my life, and now I see it very clearly. So seeing clearly is what it helps in the first place. And then
let me add, Dimi, that it can even like go as far as having like a non-dual or unitive experiences. So the deep experiences that people have when they go on a meditation path and meditate for many, many years. The end state then is that you might end up in the non-dual state, right? Or sometimes called nirvana or so, or a oneness experience. And that would also be covered in this bucket in a way. So new state experiences, new consciousness states up to this state of self-transcendence in a way of a narrow self.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's basically really literally waking up to the reality of your own life and to your own emotional and also spiritual life and interpersonal life. And then this actually permits you to start cleaning up certain things. That means suddenly certain aspects that have been lingering in the shadows of your psyche can be brought into daylight, and that means they can be worked with. So suddenly we have the opportunity to work with them in a directed and very conscious or aware way. That is also the opportunity then to grow up. That means to take on wider perspectives, and as we've seen, kind of to widen our inner container so that we can hold more of the complexities of our own inner life with our own different tendencies and conflicting emotions and feelings and thoughts, that we not get overburdened with them and that we kind of bend, but that we can sit in the midst of it all and still have this inner clarity and anchoring or grounding. And finally, if we frame the psychedelic work in a wider setting, we can also help people on the way of assuming this responsibility. So what they have seen in the psychedelic journeys, what they take as learnings from their own emotional healing and growth, what is it that they want to take back into their lives and also implement, not only on a personal level, but also professionally speaking. So what kind of vision do I want to bring to life? And what is it that is my gift to the world when we speak about leadership? So maybe that in a nutshell is how we want to frame the work. So it's not really focusing on the substance and just ingesting something and hoping that the substance will do the work, but really framing it in a theory and in a practice, in an ecology of practice for personal maturation. And this is why we think psychedelics are so powerful, because they are a technology that allows us to take a radical new perspective, to connect deeply to emotions that might even be hidden or repressed, and then give us a new space where we can build our new life on. So that was our short input. And as promised, we wanted to give you now a bit of space for your own questions. So what